The worst climbing deaths on K2. The second highest mountain on Earth. The deadliest mountain on Earth for anyone who attempts to reach its summit. Everest kills roughly 1 climber for every 100 who try. K2 kills 1 in every 4. No mountain on the planet has a worse survival rate. No mountain has turned back more experienced climbers, broken more expeditions, or produced more bodies that were never recovered. The ones who died on K2 didn't die from inexperience. They died from avalanches, altitude, frostbite, falling seracs, and decisions made at 26,000 feet, where the human brain operates at roughly 60% of its normal capacity. These are their stories. Nick Escourt. 1978. Nick Escourt was a 36-year-old British mountaineer considered one of the finest technical climbers of his generation. In the summer of 1978, he joined Chris Bonington's expedition, attempting the west ridge of K2, one of the most technically demanding routes on the mountain. Escourt had already summited several Himalayan peaks and was regarded within the climbing community as exceptionally competent in extreme conditions. On June 12, 1978, Escourt and fellow climber Peter Boardman were pushing a route through a section of the mountain known as the Black Pyramid, a treacherous band of steep rock and ice at approximately 24,000 feet. Without warning, a massive serac, a block of glacial ice the size of a building, collapsed from the slope above them. The avalanche that followed swept Escourt off the mountain instantly. Boardman was struck by the outer edge of the debris and survived. Escourt's body was never found. The avalanche had carried him thousands of feet down the south face. The expedition was immediately abandoned. Chris Bonington, who had organized the attempt, later wrote that the speed of the avalanche made survival impossible. There was no warning, no sound before impact. Nothing Escourt could have done differently. The 1986 season. 13 dead. No single year defined K2's brutality more completely than 1986. That summer, multiple international expeditions converged on the mountain simultaneously, creating a crowded and competitive atmosphere on the slopes. 27 climbers reached the summit. 13 never came back down. Renato Casarato was a 38-year-old Italian climber attempting K2 solo via the south-southwest pillar, one of the most isolated and technically demanding routes on the mountain. He had attempted the route twice before and was widely regarded as one of Italy's greatest high-altitude climbers. On July 16, 1986, Casarato was descending alone after abandoning his latest summit attempt due to deteriorating conditions. Approximately 200 meters from base camp, he fell into a crevasse hidden beneath the surface of the Godwin-Austen Glacier. His wife Goretta, who had been monitoring his descent through binoculars from base camp, watched him disappear. Other climbers reached him within minutes. Casarato was still alive at the bottom of the crevasse, speaking coherently when rescuers arrived. He died of internal injuries before he could be extracted. He was 200 meters from safety. Julie Tullis was a 47-year-old British mountaineer and filmmaker who had dedicated the final years of her life to documenting high-altitude climbing. She reached the summit of K2 on July 23, 1986, becoming the first British woman to do so. On the descent, a sudden and violent storm engulfed the upper mountain, pinning Tullis and several other climbers in a tent at Camp 4 at approximately 26,000 feet for 4 days. The storm produced winds exceeding 100 miles per hour and temperatures dropping to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Tullis developed severe pulmonary edema, fluid accumulating in her lungs, a condition that requires immediate descent to lower altitude to survive. Descent was impossible in those conditions. She died in the tent on July 27, 1986. She had been on the summit 4 days earlier. Alan Rouse was a 34-year-old British climber, considered one of the most technically gifted mountaineers of his generation. He had reached the summit of K2 on August 4, 1986, but was already showing signs of severe exhaustion during the descent. He returned to Camp 4 and was unable to continue moving. The same storm that had killed Tullis had left him weakened beyond recovery. Over the following days, other climbers who passed through Camp 4 found Rouse in a deteriorating state, unable to eat, drink, or move under his own power. He was asking for water, On August 10, 1986, the last climbers to descend from the upper mountain passed Camp 4 and found Rouse alone in his tent, alive but unresponsive. They could not carry him. They left him. He was never seen again. His body remains on K2 at approximately 26,000 feet. The 2008 disaster. 11 dead in 48 hours. August Honest, 2008, produced the single deadliest event in K22's history. A large international group of climbers from multiple expeditions began their summit push simultaneously, creating a dangerous concentration of people on the upper mountain. The fixed ropes that had been anchored on the bottleneck, a narrow couloir of ice and rock directly beneath a massive sérac field at 27,500 feet, were inadequate for the number of climbers using them. Dren Mandic was a 28-year-old Serbian climber ascending through the bottleneck when he slipped and fell. His fall pulled another climber, Jahan Beg, off the mountain as well. Beg was killed instantly. Mandic was found alive lower on the slope, but died before he could be evacuated. As the surviving climbers descended from the summit later that day, the sérac field above the bottleneck, a wall of glacial ice estimated to weigh millions of tons, released without warning. The falling ice swept through the bottleneck, destroying the fixed ropes that the descending climbers were depending on to get down safely. 11 climbers were killed in the collapse and its aftermath. Some were struck directly by the falling ice. Others found themselves above the bottleneck with no ropes, no safe descent route, and night falling at 27,000 feet. Gerard MacDonald, a 37-year-old Irish climber, was seen by survivors attempting to free Korean climbers who had become tangled in the collapsed ropes above the bottleneck. He was last seen alive at approximately 27,000 feet. His body was found the following season lower on the mountain. He had not survived the night. Hugues Daubaret was a 61-year-old French climber who had waited years for the opportunity to attempt K2. He reached the summit on August Honest and was descending through the bottleneck when the sérac collapsed. He was struck by falling ice and killed. His body was never recovered. Marco Confortola, an Italian climber, survived the night at 27,000 feet after the sérac collapse destroyed the fixed ropes. He descended the following day with severe frostbite, losing portions of his feet and toes to the cold. He was one of 11 survivors from a group that had collectively lost 11 members in under 48 hours. The numbers, as of 2024, K2 has been summited by approximately 1,000 people. 91 climbers have died attempting it. That is a fatality rate of roughly 23%. Of those 91 deaths, more than half occurred during descent. The summit is not the finish line. The summit is the halfway point. Every climber who has ever stood at 28,251 feet still had to get back down through the bottleneck, through the death zone, through the séracs, through the weather systems that build without warning over the Karakoram Range. Most of the climbers who died on K2 had already reached the summit. They died on the way home. The mountain has no interest in human achievement. It has no interest in experience, preparation, or reputation. Nick Escort was one of Britain's finest climbers. Alan Rouse was considered a generational talent. Renato Casarotto fell into a crevasse 200 meters from his tent. The mountain does not distinguish between the exceptional and the unprepared. It simply exists at 28,251 feet, and the people who go there accept those terms before they leave the ground. If you found this video useful,